Thank you, Sherer Yael, the stage is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for staying. My name is Yael Sherer. I come from a different perspective of these lovely ladies, since I was abused as a child, sexually abused by my father, and went to study cinema and made a film. What happened to me when I was a child was I realized that I was sexually abused. I told my teacher. My teacher told a social worker. The social worker spoke to me in length and for some time and promised me that she will come with me to the police to file charges against my father. That did not happen. They spoke here about mandatory report. It didn't happen in my case. I stayed at home. My father continued to abuse me. And only when my parents divorced, then the abuse stopped. Years later, I decided to file a lawsuit against my father, but I also made a film about the lawsuit. That means that during all the criminal procedures, no one was there because it was closed court, but during civil procedures, I shot my film. So I told my own story and my own narrative since I directed a documentary about myself. The problem is I couldn't show it to anybody or tell my story because revealing who I am was also illegal. So I had to appeal to the state and remove the ban on my name so I could tell my own story, control my own narrative. But what I did was not only sue my father, I also sued the social worker. Also sued the social worker. And was the first time in Israel that the state removed a social worker's immunity to court proceedings. So I was the first person in Israel to sue a social worker for damages personally. To sue a social worker personally, which made me a favorite amongst social workers. And when the film came out, I was the first victim of abuse at home that told her own story in the media about herself. That means there was no director coming to tell a story about a little girl or a young woman suing and how heroic it is and showing. I was showing myself the good, the bad, and so much ugly. And showed myself without makeup, crying, vomiting. And that was my choice. I didn't want to make it beautiful or heroic. It was simply what happened, and that shocked a few people. Now, that was my personal story that I told. But it made me realize that the difference between me and other victims was that I refused to hide. The taboo was that you don't show the victim's face, you don't tell her name, and nobody came out in the media at primetime TV and said, "Hello, my father abused me, this is me." And it just didn't happen before I did that. And it made me realize that the difference is crucial, not only for me, but for other women and men. Because it took out of the equation something that was built into the abuse. the shame. I'm not ashamed. I took the shame from myself, this rock that I was carrying, and I gave it to somebody else, in this case my father, and I said, okay, you carry it now. Because I pointed a finger at my abuser, I showed him with his face in the film. Everybody could see who he is, Dr. Moshe Sherer, this is him, face, and he had to be ashamed now. So it was lifted off my shoulders. I'm feeling very light. But myself is not the issue. There was a lot of talk about this as a social phenomena. And I realized that part of my struggle is to take the shame from the equation for other victims. And I'm doing a lot of work in that field, but it's not very interesting. I want to show you something else that's very interesting, and you'll excuse me if I ask you questions, okay? You need to wake up. Sorry. Look at this picture, and this picture. Don't look at this picture. This picture and that picture. What can you tell me about the children in these photos? They're hiding their faces. Very good. Other things that you can say about these children? They're alone. Good observation. Look at the surroundings. What can you say about the surroundings? Nothing. Is there a chair where these children were abused? Obviously not, because all of them are sitting on the floor. Okay? Can you tell me something about the nationality of these children? Any of these children black? No. Curly hair? Never. Fat? No. And what I've started to notice in the media is that these pictures tell us most of the story. And it's a story of nothingness. It's a story of nothing. These children are so generic, you couldn't say anything about them. So you might think this is good. I mean, if these children are every child, then this must be a social phenomenon, okay? Because this is any child. It's so generic that this is any child. But what happens is that this is not any child. This is nobody. This is so generic, so lacking of any kind of personality that this is everybody and nobody. So obviously, some sort of abuse never happens where there are chairs. So, not at home, not in class, not anywhere. Can you say something about this location? Nothingness. Okay, it doesn't happen in any kind of minority group because we don't want to point fingers. But it takes the personal out of the story. And a social phenomena is made of a lot of personals. It means that it happens everywhere. But this happens nowhere. Nowhere. This is nowhere. I don't know if you ever sat on the ground and you're barefoot. This girl has sandals, good for her. Anything about it? And this tells most of the story. What the media is saying to us is very little. Why? Why is the media saying very little? Because they can't say much. So most of the article is not the details, because most of them they cannot publish. It's either closed court or closed. So this is what tells us most of the story, and it's no one. And as you can see, I'm pretty much against this. And I'm thinking that the media needs to have a different approach to the narrative. I certainly have a different approach to the narrative since I determined what my narrative is. Because I was not the girl who was abused that somebody talked about. I was the girl who was abused talking herself, which is different, and I highly recommend it. But not everybody can do it. So I don't really know what the solution is, but I know it has to speak more with the victim's voice and less with the offender's voice. Since you said it yourself, the media becomes part of the offense. And let me tell you, the talkbacks about me were pretty harsh. Apparently I'm a whore, and I'm a prostitute, and I take money for sexual acts. So, know that. I'm saying that in order to have a new narrative, the media needs to stop listening to the perpetrator. They've listened to them plenty. We have their lawyers saying he's such a normal person, he comes from a nice family, his parents were Holocaust survivors, he's a doctor, la la la. We have that enough. I think we can start listening to the victims. They have their own voice. And I'm not saying you should start interviewing 4- or 5-year-old girls. Where did he touch you? No. But we have plenty now in Israel, women and men, speaking about their experiences. We need to listen to them more. I'm not saying only to them, though I want to. They have plenty to say. The only thing that prevents them from talking is the shame, the taboo. And I think that is one thing that the media itself needs to fight, because otherwise it's missing its witnesses to this Holocaust that's happening around us. It's not talking to the people themselves. They have plenty to say. So I think the first stage needs to be letting go of that taboo and starting to blame the perpetrator and not the victim. It pretty much shocked me when they had the who are the talkbacks empathizing with? Well, they empathize with the wrong person. And I think that needs to change.